Well, welcome to episode 43 of Living the Amazing Life podcast. This is your truly Coach Tim Harrell, your motivational leadership expert, as well as your business accelerator. We have a special podcast today. I thought it'd be very fitting to bring one of I would consider one of my spiritual sons, Josh Harris, who is a clinical psychologist major at Regent University. And so excited to have Josh on the podcast today. Come on, y'all, give it up for Josh Harris, who's on the podcast today. Josh, it's so good to have you here. And we're just doing a little something different. And I really want to focus on emotional wellness, mental illness. I know, our country in the beginning of COVID and during COVID focused a lot on mental illness and different things like that. But I do want to bring up a case that's happening now in our country, in the city of New York, where you have an ex-Marine, Daniel Penning, I believe his name is, who put a homeless guy in the chokehold for 6 minutes. They were on the subway, and of course, the homeless guy who was suffering with mental illness was harassing the passengers and said that he was going to kill them and all of this stuff. And so when he launched at one of the passengers, which was a female, the ex-Marine, Daniel Penning, got up and put him in a chokehold. He had him in a chokehold for 6 months. 6 minutes. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, the young man who was homeless, who was mental ill, deceased. Mm-hmm. And so now the ex-Marine is on trial for murder. Mm-hmm. And so you've been a person who you're now dealing with people who have these emotional illness and mental illness. Just from your experience, just kind of share with us from your experience of dealing with mental illness.
Well, thank you for having me, Apostle. He's my apostle, by the way. It's an honor and privilege to be here with you. It's disheartening. It really is, mm-hmm. Apostle. I think that mental health in general has been coming up in the forefront, honestly, for a few years now. And I would say that it's getting the same amount of attention as like our regular health is. Right. The disheartening part about this case in New York right now is mm-hmm. that the response to individuals who are going through moments of psychosis is one of immediate action, lack of empathy, and almost like this, I want to fix the problem right then and there. It's like a vigilante kind of mm-hmm. response. And that's not the response that's needed. Individuals like the young man who lost his life, who was homeless, who was going through that psychosis, they need help. Right. They need to be linked up with resources, and they need to be kind of linked up with individuals who have that training to assist with the mental disturbances that they're going through. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the young man who lost his life is one of many in this mm-hmm. country who suffer from mental illness that need the help, but there's just not enough providers to provide that help, and or there's not adequate allocation of funds to provide opportunities, whether that looks like mental health courts, whether that looks like linking them up with like different mental health providers. Mm-hmm. We're in a very, very real shortage of mental health providers in this country, but there's more and more individuals that are suffering from any type of myriad of mental health issues. It's just a lack of resource allocation, the lack of individuals who are needed in this field to provide the work that we need.
And why do you think that is? Why would I can't imagine the responsibility and the stress of caring for people who have mental illness, and even the burden that you carry with knowing that sometimes there's not a lot that you can do for the individual. So Do you think that that's the reason why a lot of people don't get involved in the mental illness? I don't want to say industry, but healthcare.
I think we're in a very unique situation, Apostle, right now, where I think we're going through a shift in as far as like how we view mental health in this country.
Right.
I can speak to when I grew up, mental health had a negative stigma. To even seek services from a therapist, you were considered quote unquote crazy.
Right.
I've come from I can't speak for myself, but a lot of my colleagues and peers growing up in my day and age, like we talked about how like we could just pray that away, like or if there's any kind of like mental health illness that related to your lack of faith with God or something wrong internally with you, or don't label that because you're giving power to that thing. And it really does a disservice for pointing out truly what it is that individual is going through, and it makes their experiences, their hurt, their pain, whatever that is, feel like it's not real and it's not relevant and it's not and it's just, it provides moments where people are forced to kind of like shoulder that burden, that hurt and pain without any resources or ways to kind of like process and deal with that said pain. And so we have that. And now we're trying to, you had mentioned the pandemic a little bit earlier, people are kind of forced to sit in those moments of uncomfortability, sit in those moments of pain, loss, suffering, depression, anxiety, all those things that we kind of like shied away from, or we kind of said that we didn't recognize as true mental health ailments, or we categorize those as like only crazy people have those things. Right. Well, no, it's not only is it a normal occurrence that individuals go through depressive states or have moments of anxiety. It's fine to label it, and that isn't necessarily, it's not indicative to who you are as a person. It's just labeling something that captures what you're going through at the moment. Right. And so with all that being said, it is emotionally taxing. It can be, it can be mentally taxing as well to be put in situations where, especially if you're empathic, you're wanting to help other individuals. However, you just don't have the resources to point them into the right direction, or maybe there isn't any allocation of said resources to help with individuals who go through those things.
So I mean, I'm quite sure, like you're saying, it's taxing when you really can't provide the proper care for someone who's dealing with that. And I know you've dealt with family, children, or all sorts of people. And as you were talking, I was thinking, I said, I think that all of us suffer a little bit with some level of mental illness. I mean, I don't know the percentages. You're the doctor. I don't know. I know all of us have some type of things that we battle with, and I like what you said about when we don't want to be labeled as crazy. We don't want to be labeled as that, because then people disassociate themselves from us because we're labeled as crazy. But all of us have some type of dysfunction that we battle with, and sometimes is you like with the church, you tell people, okay, we just come to the altar, we'll lay hands on you, and we'll pray for you, and I believe prayer works, no doubt about it. But there's some things that we have to be very intentional in dealing with an issue, whether it's through therapy, counseling, whatever the case may be. We have to really deal with and get to the root cause of why this person is functioning this way. And then I know, sometimes the church, we were related to a spirit, and that may be true, but that that shouldn't give us the reason not to deal with an issue and really sit down and let a person talk it out, or let a person and you're the expert in this, the process or the clinical process that a person goes through when they've been diagnosed with mental illness. So I think that it's important that not only as a church but as a society that we focus on it, because it kind of died down a little bit. At one time it was mental illness, especially during COVID, mental illness, and then it just for some reason it kind of died down, but it didn't go away.
Right.
Yeah, it's still there, and I'm quite sure you see it on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You are a gift to the earth. You are a gift to the earth. And when you begin to think that way, when you change your mindset and begin to think that I'm a gift to the earth, right? The people are blessed because of me. People are better off because of me. When you begin to think that way, it shifts your perspectives, your decisions, things that you go after. It shifts that. Because now you're not, and I'm not saying that you're thinking that you're better than everybody. No, you're thinking that, your thinking is I'm a gift to the earth, so I have something to offer. And most of us, we don't pursue our dreams, we don't pursue our goals, we don't go after what we desire, is because we believe that we don't have anything to offer. I'm here to tell you, you have something to offer. And God He put it in you. You just got to find that, and it's all wrapped up in your original you. And once you find that and take an assessment of that, you'll know what you can offer. You'll know the gift that you have. You'll know your purpose and what you can do to make someone else's life better. Bruce Lee said, self-knowledge involves relationship. To know oneself is to study oneself in action with another person. Relationship is a process of self-evaluation or self-revelation. Relationship is the mirror in which you discover yourself. To be is to be related.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that no, I think you bring up a good point, Apostle. Like, I think that when we look at society as a whole, there is a recognition of people suffering. You kind of alluded to this, but when we talk about like just how we process things in the church, we kind of link it to a lot of times kind of like the church's response to mental health illness was sin, and it kind of related to your lack of relationship with God. And so that's disheartening for someone who is dealing with like a loss, and they're coming to terms, they're trying to wrap their head around it, trying to make sense of said loss, or the health ailments that could contribute to one's mental health concerns. Like, how do you talk to that person and say that, when they're going through a loss or any kind of like mental health illness as a result of that said loss, is it appropriate for them to then be like, oh, well, you need to pray more, and because of this, like, you're feeling sad. I mean, like, God, like, just give it to God and He'll take care of it, which is true. However, like, while that person is going through it, how are we providing light and empathy and providing a safe space for one to feel heard and acknowledged? I find that to be very, very dismissing for individuals who are going through that, because they already tend to put themselves in a box and separate themselves from others when they're going through those distressing moments. How are we kind of like honoring them and bringing them into the light, and providing like a positive healing space for them if we are
right? And would you think that I guess some people think that mental illness is hereditary, that you inherit inherited this mental illness from, maybe a parent or a grandparent, and so how would you speak to is that something that can be inherited?
Yeah, I mean, like we always look at things like there isn't like a direct, we call it in the field of just science in general, like they call that like direct correlations. So because this happens, this is going to be the results, like a 1 + 1 = 2 thing. With mental health, it's there's always a gray area that we kind of operate in. So I think that for individuals who had certain mood disorders like depression or some forms of anxiety, if we look into like bipolar depression, things like that, there are hereditary physiological factors that can play a role into one developing said diagnoses. However, that doesn't, it can increase the likelihood of those things happening, but that doesn't necessarily mean that because your mother has these or your father has these things, like you're going to have it. Right. It could contribute to it. I'm not trying to get off topic here, but when we kind of go through, when we have a client or a patient that comes through like our clinic or anything like that, we look at the history as far as like what, if parents have these.
Because that's the same thing when you're going into the doctor, they ask you, if you have a heart problem, did your mother have a heart problem? Did your dad have a heart problem? Yeah. So because I believe that, a part of living the amazing life, I can't really live the amazing life if I'm suffering with some type of emotional sickness or some type of mental health. And I think that what you're doing as far as, getting your doctorate in clinical psychology, and, you soon be, even though we call you Dr. Josh, we know technically you're not Dr. Josh yet. and we're excited about how we can be, not only do we want to empower our community with business and leadership, physical health, mental health, we want to make sure that we are able to minister and to meet the needs of the total man or the total person. You can't just say man anymore. You have to say total person. And we believe that this is a part. We believe that a lot of dysfunction, not in homes and in church, in the marketplace, is because people are suffering with some level of mental illness. I mean, you can have the smartest person in the room, and you can have your boss could be, or the CEO of a company can be suffering with mental illness, and that's why they respond the way they respond. So, what if you had where you tested everybody for mental illness who came to, a part of your job, they test you for drugs and they test you, and they do background checks. They test your, check your credit. What if they did some type of mental illness cosmic test or something like that?
I mean, yeah, Apostle. I think in some positions in society that's required. I mean, if we, I think about like situations where another human being's life is in your hands. I think those tests are necessary and imperative, because you don't want somebody who can fly off the handle, who isn't emotionally regulated, particularly like if you're in a very, very high stressful job where you're having to make quick decisions and things like that. We know just based off like our mental health in general, how that can play a role into people's decision making, right. How they are even mentally there to process the situation that's in front of them. I think that those things are necessary. You brought up a good point when you brought up like cognitive testing and things like that. That's something that I'm interested in when it comes to providing set tests for law enforcement individuals or EMTs, firefighters, some doctors. It's necessary because we don't want situations that we see in the news where individuals are operating in these different organizations, different professions, and they aren't themselves regulated. And honestly, like Apostle, that's just, I feel like that's a way to kind of like shed more light into the whole picture of mental health, but also like helping someone kind of recognize and truly step into like living out the amazing life.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think that, I would want to have my doctor tested. And I think even though you mentioned law enforcement, we've had some incidents with law enforcement, who and a lot of it is, we see that we have a lot of issue with black men in law enforcement, and I believe just in some cases there could have been that law. What you call it when they go to war? PTSD. So some of them are suffering with that, and now even though they some are tested and go through whatever counseling they need to go through, and of course especially coming back from war and things like that, they're very careful with allowing a person to become a police officer. But I think that in a lot of cases where families have been murdered, and then the perpetrator turned the gun on himself, all kind of different situations that has occurred due to mental illness not being properly treated. We think about our veterans, Our veterans, the question is, are our veterans being really treated properly? Are they given the care that they deserve? They go and they fight for their country. Some have given their lives. Their families have suffered because of them being away and doing what they do for their country, and then they come back home, and they don't get the proper care they need because of things they've seen, things they've done in war, and because it was doing it for their country, and then they come back and their minds just can't wrap around normalcy. It's hard for them to wrap their minds around normalcy, and when they come from a place of just chaos, and not having, like you said, people available, not having enough psychologists to be in place to help with those guys transitioning back into normalcy, and it could be very devastating. It could be very devastating, and I think that this is a very important subject, even though we don't hear. You may not hear a podcast talking about mental. I'm quite sure they're out there, but I haven't came across one lately. And normally you would hear a lot on the news and in the media and different things like that about mental illness. But it seemed like after the pandemic, it pretty much died down. So.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, as a society, we have selective memory. I think that this is a steady fight. I think that just to bring awareness of the importance of mental health in general, I think that when you brought up soldiers, Apostle, that it's true. Individuals, because we're all human beings at the end of the day, right? They're not machines. They're not AI. They are living, breathing human beings with emotions and experiences that shape how they respond in different spaces that they occupy. And unfortunately, someone who is subjected to lots of traumatic experiences, not only can it affect how they are processing and trying to make sense of everything, but also it affects like how they respond. So we call those like physiological like responses. So I'm always aware because I have to be that way to survive, because this is the environment that I'm in. And then when I come back home, I'm always on high alert. Like I have colleagues, or not just colleagues, I have friends who have been in the military where they go to a restaurant and they cannot put themselves and position themselves with their back towards the exit, because they have, based on their experiences, they know that being you have to be positioned in such a way where you have to be aware of your surroundings. Right. And we can look at it as, oh, that person is very, very like aware of their surroundings. However, that's a trauma response in the grand scheme of things. Like
that's that. I mean, yeah. If you got a person, because it's almost like they're paranoid. Yeah, they're like, you know, they really can't get comfortable, you know, because of they always got to, you know, how the military, I got to watch my six, you know, and so that's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, could you even think about it too? Also, like, we can take military, we can take individuals who've gone through complex trauma throughout their lives, throughout their childhood. We could take individuals who have been subjected to like violent environments growing up. We could take individuals who come out of the correctional facilities. Like, there's a bunch of different environments that people operate in, where they are having to be human beings and process the things that like normal, quote unquote, and like those things aren't normal. And when you're kind of put in the situations where you're forced to kind of like make sense of things that aren't normal, some people normalize it by saying, oh, this is where I just grew up in. But that's still just trauma. That's still a trauma response. That's still avoidant type behavior. You're not really truly processing the things that you're being exposed to or witnessing. And I think that it's disingenuous and does a disservice to young men and women who give the ultimate sacrifice to this country, to then say, we're going to train you to operate in this way, and then come back and adjust after being in some violent situations, or just situations in general, for years. I'm talking about for decades, some people, or even just a little bit of time, even if it's just a number of years. Like, it's not realistic to then say, okay, well, have at it, be a normal, productive member of society. Who could do that?
Wow. So guys, take advantage of that, those resources that Josh had just mentioned. And of course, we'll definitely bring him back on the podcast and talk more about mental health and mental wellness. We definitely, I believe that God, you know, the Bible said God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of peace and a sound mind. And I just believe that God wants us well. And when you're not well, you cannot live the amazing life. And so our goal, our mission here at on this podcast is to make sure that you're 100% complete and whole, so that you can enjoy all the things that God has for you. So come on, give it up for Josh Harris again. God bless you, Josh. Thank you for joining us today on the podcast. And again, guys, we'll be right here next week, this time. And you know what time it is. It's time for you to live your amazing life. God bless you.